Hey guys, tonight we're floating into the heart of a city that shimmered on a lake, where gardens floated instead of sitting on solid earth, and every path was liquid. You won't need sandals, just a canoe. Welcome to Tenochtitlan, the Aztec, capital built in the middle of Lake Texcoco, a place so marvelously engineered and bizarre that even the conquistadors had to pause before pillaging it. This was a metropolis suspended on water, held up by willpower, mud, and thousands of woven dreams. You'll step aboard your canoe, hand-carved, gently bobbing, and drift into a city crisscrossed with canals instead of streets. As the paddle slices through the surface, ripples catch moonlight and the distant hum of flutes and frogs lulls you like a lullaby from another age. You're already somewhere else, somewhere older, wetter, and strangely more organized than many modern cities. Of course, you probably wouldn't survive here long. The altitude, the spicy food, the political intrigue, not to mention the 5 a.m. ceremonial drumming, would do you in within a week. But for now, you're safe, you're horizontal, and there's no need to fight anyone for land, because land floats here. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing the map light up. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint at the lake's horizon. Tenochtitlan appears like a shimmering mirage. Buildings, rising out of the water, connected by long straight causeways. Mist clings to the edges, hiding the floating farms at first glance, but as you get closer, the details sharpen. It's almost like Venice, if Venice were built by botanists who thought architecture should sprout. Historians still argue whether the city was truly built on a series of natural islands or if it was completely man-made through land reclamation. The answer probably is both. The Mexica, whom we now call the Aztecs, were resourceful migrants who arrived here in the 14th century. What they lacked in prime real estate, they made up for in sheer stubbornness and brilliance. They didn't wait for dry land. They made it themselves. Your canoe glides past a bundle of reeds. It looks like an oversized raft at first, but then you notice plants growing on top. Rows of maize, squash, even sunflowers. This is a chinampa, a floating garden. The base is mud dredged from the lake bed, held in place with woven reeds and anchored by willow trees whose roots stitch the whole thing together. It's an artificial island, and it's just the beginning. You take a slow breath. The air smells of warm water, distant cooking fires, and something green, lush, breathing. There's a peaceful rhythm to this place, like the city inhales with you. You pass under a simple wooden bridge and emerge into the wider lake, where dozens of chinampas form neat grids. From above, this would look like farmland, carved into a puzzle of aquatic veins. A fisherman waves lazily from the shade of a pole-borne shelter. He's balanced in his own canoe, one hand trailing through the water. His net is out but limp. Maybe today is more about watching the world go by. You nod back, not wanting to disturb the silence. It's a respectful kind of quiet here. Even the birds don't shout. They coo like the city has taught them manners. At your side, a dragonfly lands on your knee. It stays longer than expected, riding with you like a sleepy guardian. You wonder if it remembers this place from another life. Because if a city can float, maybe memories can too. That thought carries you deeper into the maze of canals. Towering above in the distance, barely visible through the haze, are the pyramids of Tenochtitlan, the ceremonial core. But we'll get there later. Tonight the journey begins at water level, with calloused hands pushing wooden paddles, with wet footprints on woven mats, with gardens that shouldn't exist but do, one mainstream historical fact. This city, at its peak, housed over 200,000 people and had a complex sanitation system that included aqueducts and waste removal by canoe. Take that medieval Europe, one quirky fringe tidbit. The Aztecs believed Lake Texcoco was a divine mirror, sometimes used for prophecy, sometimes for shaving. You decide not to ask which came first. As the sun lifts lazily above the eastern rim of the lake, the city of Tenochtitlan stretches, yawns, and wakes. You're still drifting along the canals, your paddle grazing the water like a brush on silk. The mist rises slowly, unveiling more of the city's geometry, a perfect gridwork of narrow water avenues like veins feeding a living organism. This city doesn't do roads, not the way you know them. Instead, imagine your neighborhood replaced with watery corridors, canoes instead, of cars and traffic jams consisting of fish, ducks, and vendors selling tamales from paddle boats. You're in the middle of a metropolis designed to float, flow, and flourish. A gentle bump rocks your canoe. You've brushed against another vessel, this one smaller, occupied by a boy with a basket of chili peppers and avocados. He grins, says something in Nahuatl that might be, "Watch where you're floating," and paddles on with practiced ease. You chuckle softly. It's hard to take offense when your taxi just happens to be a banana leaf canoe. Historians still argue whether Tenochtitlan's canal system was inspired more by environmental necessity or by spiritual symbolism. Was water the most efficient route, or was it a divine medium connecting this world with the next? Either way, it worked. The canals linked residential quarters to marketplaces, temples, gardens, even latrines. An urban planner's dream with a splash of mysticism. You pass beneath a woven reed archway. Here, in the quieter residential canals, life hums at a slower tempo. Children wash maize in baskets, women kneel on wooden planks to rinse clothes, and old men sip chocolate. Yes, chocolate, not as candy but as a thick, bitter drink. You try not to stare, but it's hard not to. Everything is familiar but not. It's like seeing the origin story of 1,000 global habits in one quiet morning. A canoe glides past with a rooster in it. Just the rooster. You try not to ask. Questions. The air smells of warm corn and damp bark. Willow trees lean toward the water, their roots gripping the soil that holds the chinampas in place. You can just make out the rhythmic sound of farming tools clinking against wet earth in the distance. Obsidian hoes tapping time like a xylophone of stone. You'll get closer to them soon. You pause near a small clearing where 3 canoes have docked. A group of women sit under a cloth canopy, gossiping over handfuls of beans. They speak in fast, rhythmic Nahuatl, sharp consonants softened by laughter. One of them catches your eye and smirks. Maybe they're talking about you. Maybe they think your canoe is too clean, or maybe they're just glad the morning is calm. In this moment, the city feels impossibly serene. You've forgotten momentarily that this was once the capital of a powerful empire. An empire that could raise armies, demand tribute from hundreds of other city-states, and execute complex rituals involving flaming arrows and heart-shaped obsidian knives, but not now. Not in this quiet patchwork of water and reeds. Now it's just you and the canoe drifting past a city that works with water, not against it. A mainstream fact? Tenochtitlan's canal system was so effective that Hernan Cortés famously compared it to Venice, albeit with fewer gondolas and more jaguars carved into the railing. A quirkier fringe tidbit? It's said that some Aztec parents taught their toddlers to swim before they could walk, because it was more useful. You look down into the water and nod. Practical parenting. A lone heron flaps overhead, casting a flickering shadow across your lap. The light has changed again. The morning is stretching now, golden and sharp, and you sense the city's tempo increasing. Canoes multiply. Children giggle. Vendors shout greetings across the water, and still your paddle dips softly, pushing you toward the next quiet marvel. You drift around a gentle bend, and suddenly it's right there in front of you, one of the floating gardens, a real chinampa. You edge closer, and the water becomes shallower, clearer. Below the surface, you glimpse the interwoven lattice of reeds, soil, and roots that keeps this thing afloat. It's like nature and human engineering had a quiet handshake. You pull your canoe alongside and hop out, your feet landing on something that shouldn't be solid, but is. The ground yields just slightly under your weight, spongy yet stable. Welcome to one of the most clever agricultural inventions in history, one that fed an empire and baffled Spanish invaders. The chinampa stretches ahead in neat rows, corn stalks to your left, squash vines curling at your feet, and marigolds blooming. Like gold coins just beyond, the air is thicker here, richer with the scent of wet soil, pollen, and a faint undertone of chili smoke from a distant fire. So what exactly are you standing on? Picture a raft, built from reeds and anchored with stakes to keep it from drifting. Then scoop up mud from the bottom of the lake and layer it on top, thick, nutrient-rich gloop that could make anything grow. Then plant willows at the corners. Their roots pierce through everything, sewing the chinampa into place like a living anchor. Repeat thousands of times. Boom! You've built a floating countryside. Historians still argue whether chinampas were a late invention by necessity or whether they were a continuation of even older Mesoamerican farming techniques from the Teotihuacan era. Either way, the Aztecs perfected the practice. Each plot could yield multiple harvests a year, outperforming traditional land-based agriculture with less water waste and more ecological balance. You kneel to touch the soil. It's damp but not muddy, thick but not heavy. You press your fingers into it, and it holds shape like cake batter. A frog hops past your wrist without a care in the world. You blink and realize there are dozens of them, tiny green gardeners patrolling the perimeter for bugs. There's a rhythm to this place, a patient hum. Farmers move slowly between rows, their feet bare, their tools simple, obsidian-tipped digging sticks, wooden hoes, reed baskets slung over shoulders. One man nods to you as he carefully mounds soil around the base of a maize plant. Another pauses to pull a weed with the reverence of a priest adjusting an altar cloth. Quirky fact: some Chinampa farmers reportedly sang to their crops, part superstition, part pest control. The melodies weren't just tunes, they mimicked birds or scared off unwanted bugs. You imagine yourself crooning to a tomato plant and can't help but smile. Farming here was practical but never boring. A young girl skips past, dragging a small bundle of twigs tied into a sweep broom. She waves at you, then scolds a duck who has wandered a little too far from its mud pool. There's no fence, just habit and ritual. The duck obeys. As you walk further along the garden path, the view widens. These Chinampas aren't isolated plots. They're a vast checkerboard, each field separated by a narrow canal just wide enough for a canoe. The whole lake has been tamed into a giant vegetable patch that somehow floats, thrives, and obeys the rhythm of the sun. And if you think that's impressive, get this. Some Chinampas weren't just for growing food. There were flower farms, herb gardens, even spaces dedicated to growing sacred plants used in ceremonies. You spot a row of vivid red amaranth, once used in rituals before the Spanish outlawed it. The petals glow like embers against the green. You pause beside a water channel and look down. Fish dart past, tiny flashes of silver. The farmers didn't just grow food, they grew systems. These canals were home to ducks, frogs, eels, even turtles. It was a self-sustaining aquaponic setup centuries before the term existed. Fish waste fed the plants. The plants oxygenated the water. The cycle spun on. Mainstream fact: Chinampas could yield up to 7 crops a year thanks to the fertile mud and continuous moisture. And the wild tidbit? Some Chinampas had spite plots, tiny slivers carved from family farms to prevent neighbors from claiming too much land. Petty? Maybe, but very human. You climb back into your canoe, the garden bobbing gently behind you, and push off into the next narrow channel. The reeds close in again, whispering secrets in the breeze. One frog lets out a disapproving croak. Maybe your singing wasn't up to standard. The sky has shifted again. Bluer now, warmer. Somewhere in the city, drums begin to sound low and steady. You're not headed there yet. Not to the pyramids, you've got more floating to do. You drift slowly from the garden-laced canals into a slightly wider waterway, the kind where the city breathes a little louder. There's motion here, families in double-wide canoes, traders ferrying baskets of maize, and children paddling backward. Just for the thrill, you pass by a canoe loaded entirely with flowers, not for eating, just for looking. Rows of purple dahlias, flaming orange marigolds, and long-stemmed red blooms sway with every ripple. But you're on the trail of something more familiar, or rather, something almost familiar. Food. You begin to recognize the shapes of things you've seen on supermarket shelves before they became globalized and wrapped in plastic. A woman pulls up beside you in her canoe. She's roasting something on a clay griddle balanced over a pot of coals. The smell wafts over, smoky, earthy, and warm. She offers a small packet wrapped in leaves. You open it and discover mashed avocado, tomato, a sliver of red chili, all nestled inside a soft corn cake. Congratulations, you've just eaten something older than most European monarchies. It's easy to forget, floating here among flowers and frogs, that some of your favorite foods were cultivated in this very soil. Tomatoes, for instance, an Aztec staple long before they starred in Italian cuisine. You chew slowly, staring at the fruit stands floating beside you, realizing that without this empire, pizza wouldn't exist. Let that sink in. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs domesticated certain crops independently or inherited agricultural wisdom from earlier Mesoamerican cultures like the Olmecs or the Zapotecs. Either way, their selection of ingredients is a culinary mic drop. Tomatoes, avocados, amaranth, chia, beans, squash, maize, chili peppers, and cacao. Yes, cacao, the drink of gods, long before it became your guilty pleasure. You stop at a floating kiosk, a literal snack bar. It's no bigger than a rowboat, but the vendor inside has bowls of seeds, clay pots of atoll, a warm corn drink, and a small stack of tamales steamed in banana leaves. She sees you staring and says something like, "First time." You nod. She laughs gently and passes you a tiny cup of frothy brown liquid. It's thick, it's bitter. It tastes like a storm of dirt, heat, and moonlight. Congratulations again. You're drinking chocolate the way Moctezuma did. No sugar, no milk, just ground cacao water and maybe a little chili. It's not sweet, but it is powerful. They believed this was the fuel of warriors and royalty, and after one sip you believe it too. You recline in your canoe now, full of ancient calories and modern awe. The boat glides past a series of chinampas dedicated entirely to culinary herbs. Epizota, Hoja Santa coriander. The air smells like a recipe. A few hummingbirds zip past your face like feathered arrows, their wings buzzing like miniature fans. And just when you think you've had your fill of farming, food, and floral markets, your canoe gently bumps into something hard, a platform. You've arrived at one of the larger communal cooking spaces, half kitchen, half temple, entirely functional. Fires crackle under clay comals, and women grind corn on metates with rhythmic, echoing motions. One of them smiles at you and gestures for you to try. You kneel beside her, take hold of the stone pestle and begin to grind the corn. It's harder than it looks. Your arms ache. The masa sticks to your fingers like polite glue, but there's something hypnotic about the rhythm, the low hum of voices, the scent of roasted maize in the air. You lose track of time. You've gone from tourist to participant. Welcome to the kitchen. Mainstream fact? The Aztecs invented nixtamalization, a method of soaking maize in lime water to unlock its nutrients, a process still used in authentic tortilla making today. Quirky tidbit. Some nobles flavored their tamales with edible flowers, scorpions, or even powdered jade. Dinner was sometimes a flex. You finally roll back into your canoe, belly full and fingers sticky. The sun is high now, casting clear shadows across the chinampas. You lie back, exhale, and float. For a city built on water, it's surprisingly grounding. As you drift onward, the pyramids loom larger in the haze, but you're not going there yet. There's still more floating to do, and you haven't met the gardens with teeth. The water narrows again, and the reeds grow taller, wilder, less manicured than the tidy paths you've glided through before. You feel the hush settle, like stepping from a bustling marketplace into an old cathedral. Even the birds have changed. No longer chirping but croaking low and slow from somewhere unseen. Then just ahead you see it, a chinampa unlike the others. Darker, wilder. It's overgrown with strange plants, spiky, twisting things with colors that seem exaggerated by the sun. Red flowers shaped like daggers, vines that crawl rather than climb. And there at the edges a row of stone carvings, grimacing faces, wide eyes and teeth. Lots of teeth. You've arrived at one of the ceremonial gardens, the ones where agriculture and religion wove into the same leafy tapestry. These weren't just for growing food. They were designed to impress, protect, and sometimes intimidate. Skulls, both real and carved, peer at you from under the leaves. Stone jaguars lounge between rows of herbs. A clay eagle perches on a pole like it's waiting for orders. You ease your canoe alongside the chinampa, heart beating just a little faster. This plot doesn't hum with productivity, it pulses with intention. You step off cautiously, feet crunching on dry petals and bits of obsidian. Historians still argue whether these ceremonial chinampas were common in noble households or reserved for elite temples. Some say they were private sanctuaries, where priest farmers grew sacred plants used in rituals. Others suggest they served a more political purpose, a way for nobles to show off their divine connection to the land and sky. Whatever the truth, they made a statement. And you're standing in one. There's something theatrical here. Not a stage exactly, but a sense that someone or something is watching. You notice the layout of the plants forms a spiral, subtly guiding you inward. You follow it, because of course you do. At the center you find a tree, twisted, silver-barked and blooming with waxy red pods. A priest once harvested these under moonlight, grinding the seeds into ink or incense or medicine, or maybe poison. Nobody kept neat labels in those days, and that's half the mystery. A low wind stirs the leaves. For a moment you hear something. Whispering? No, just the reeds brushing against each other. Probably. You make a mental note. Next time, don't listen to too many ghost stories before a chinampa tour. A child's laugh snaps the tension. You turn and see two children paddling past, oblivious, to the drama of the ceremonial garden. They wave, giggle, and vanish around the bend. Just another day in Tenochtitlan. You glance around once more. Beneath the theatricality, this garden holds real power. Not just religious or political, but botanical. The Aztecs knew their plants. They used herbs to cure fevers, calm nerves, stop bleeding, and, when diplomacy failed, induce hallucinations. Vivid enough to make an enemy surrender. One mainstream fact. The Aztecs maintained detailed botanical knowledge, with over 200 medicinal plants catalogued by their herbalists, long before European doctors could agree on how blood worked. A quirkier tidbit. Some chinampas were guarded at night by trained birds, geese and cranes taught to shriek when strangers approached. Nature's original security system. You leave the ceremonial garden behind, paddling once more into the quieter green. The water is darker here, dappled with floating petals. Your canoe bumps gently into a mat of lily pads. One opens its white bloom as if in slow applause. You take that as a good sign. As you drift forward, you pass a series of gardens arranged by color, one golden, one crimson, one pale green. These may have been aesthetic, medicinal, or simply someone's way of organizing their floating backyard. Either way, you feel as if you've stumbled into a floating art gallery curated by gods. You notice now how many layers exist in this city. Above the gardens, birds circle. Below the water, fish twist silently. In the mud, roots clutch secrets older than memory. And here you are, floating in the middle, part guest, part ghost, part gardener. The sun has shifted again. The shadows are softer now, longer, brushing across the chinampas like sleepy fingers. The wind has returned, cooling your skin. It brings with it the scent of charcoal and crushed herbs. Somewhere in the distance, a drum beats once, then falls. Silent? You're not sure what time it is. You're not sure it matters. The gardens with teeth have had their say, and the water is calling again. The sky blushes with early warmth as morning officially settles into day. The mist has lifted now, revealing more of the city's patchwork layout. Your paddle glides effortlessly, dipping in time with your breath. Ahead, smoke curls gently upward from a dozen scattered rooftops. Not fire, ritual, not destruction welcoming. Tenochtitlan is beginning its daily dance, and you found yourself at the soft, smoky beginning. You're approaching a modest island, not a chinampa this time, but one of the rare dry patches with stone underfoot. A thin column of copal incense drifts upward from a simple altar near the shoreline. Two elderly women kneel before it, swaying slightly as they chant. You recognize none of the words, but the rhythm is comforting, measured, meditative, like a heartbeat made from breath. You dock your canoe and step carefully onto the damp earth. All around you, the signs of mourning are unmistakable. Women grind maize for tortillas. A young man prepares his fishing net. A parrot screeches from a perch and is immediately shushed by a toddler who, frankly, seems in charge. The day doesn't begin with alarms here. It begins with scent. You catch whiffs of wood smoke, toasted corn, stewing beans, and something sharp, chili perhaps, or fermented cactus fruit. Each aroma is a note in a familiar symphony. You feel like you've heard it before in a dream. Woman offers you a small cake, a dense disc made of amaranth and honey, wrapped in maize husk and still warm. You bite in. It's sweet but grounding, gritty in the best way. It's not breakfast food you're used to, but it settles into your chest like you've earned it. Historians still argue whether the Aztecs structured their daily lives strictly by cosmic calendars or by environmental necessity. Did the sunrise determine the start of work, or did the humidity? Was ritual timing more important than agricultural logic? You suspect the answer is yes to all of it. In this world, the practical and the sacred rarely stand apart. You find yourself trailing, a family walking toward a temple platform, the parents in plain tunics, the children with clay figures in their hands. They're not headed to a grand pyramid, just a local shrine tucked beneath an overhang of stone and flowering vines. The air is quiet, respectful, but not heavy. This isn't the thunder of empire, it's the whisper of community. A priest in a robe the color of dusk steps forward. His face is marked with white lines, not paint but ash. He places a clay bowl on the ground, and inside it, something burns low and slow, releasing a new smell, peppery and sweet, like cinnamon with secrets. You stand at the edge of the group, not quite in the circle, but not outside it either. You're simply there, listening to the soft clapping of hands, the rustle of fabric, the rhythm of feet shifting on stone. One mainstream fact: the Aztecs began their day with ritual cleansing, either physical bathing or spiritual fumigation. They believed in beginning clean body and soul. Quirky tidbit: some Chinampa farmers swore by morning conversations with their plants, believing each crop had a personality that could influence its growth. Tomatoes, apparently, appreciated compliments. You retreat quietly, making your way back to your canoe. Behind you the prayers continue, not loud, not long, just enough to remind you that in Tenochtitlan, even growing corn was a dialogue with the divine. As you drift again through the canal, a light breeze rustles the willows. The city's waking music surrounds you now, clinking stone tools, soft voices, water slapping at canoe hulls. Somewhere nearby, a reed flute begins to play. It's out of tune, maybe, but charming, probably a child just learning. You look down, into the water. A school of fish darts by, scattering in a flicker of silver. Above, a dragonfly zips past your ear, then doubles back like it forgot something. Time seems slower here. Not stalled, just unconcerned with clocks. You glance toward the horizon and see the first hints of the ceremonial district rising in the distance. The temples and pyramids wait, but there's no rush. In Tenochtitlan, the day unfolds like a petal, not all at once. You paddle on. The water reflects the sky and your canoe carves a gentle path between the floating gardens. Smoke rises, music hums, the sun warms your back, and for the first time in a while, your breath comes deeper, easier. As your canoe slices forward, the hum of daily life slowly fades behind you. The canals widen again, and with every stroke, the shadows of something massive begin to stretch across the water. You feel it before you fully see it, an ancient presence, rising out of the lake like a mirage baked into stone. The temples of Tenochtitlan are ahead. You squint upward. There they are, pyramids, layered like staircases to the sun, painted in faded hues of red, blue, and white. They shimmer faintly. In the midday heat, their stone flanks dappled with the shadows of circling birds. From this distance, they don't look imposing. They look unreal, like a memory too bold to forget. You slow your paddling, letting the current do the work. The pyramid of Huitzilopochtli, god of the sun and war, towers above all. It's not the only one. There are temples to Tlaloc, to Quetzalcoatl, even smaller shrines tucked behind walls of woven reeds. Each structure is part of a massive ceremonial complex, built at the very heart of the city, which was in turn built at the heart of a lake. Heart upon heart upon heart. Historians still argue whether this grand city was built according to cosmic alignment or geographic practicality. Did the Aztecs map the stars and mirror them in stone, or did they simply build where they could and romanticize it afterward? You glance up at the twin pyramids. It could be either. It could be both. You dock your canoe alongside a stone jetty and step onto the temple platform. The heat from the stone rises into your sandals. You can see artisans working nearby, chiseling, painting, polishing. A boy carries a basket of ochre dust. An old man paints a feathered serpent across the base of a column. The temples aren't just ceremonial. They're alive with constant upkeep. Think of them like your neighbor's obsessive garden, only instead of roses, he's cultivating a 90-foot monument to the god of rain. As you ascend a gentle slope, your fingers brush against carvings. You recognize maize. You see jaguars, serpents, eagles, and frogs, always frogs. It's as if the whole ecosystem is written in stone, reminding you who really owns the land, or in this case, the lake. Midway up the stairs, you pause to catch your breath. The climb isn't long, but the altitude has a way of testing your lungs. The sun presses down now, hotter and more insistent. You shield your eyes and look across the city. From here, the view is something else. The chinampas stretch, in every direction like green tiles set in water. Smoke curls from cook fires. Canoes trace watery lines between homes and gardens. Beyond that, the lake shimmers like a mirror held to the sky. And beyond that, barely visible, volcanoes loom, silent but present. You feel small, but in the best way. A priest joins you, his robe simple, his gaze unreadable. He carries a bundle of herbs and a cup of water mixed with crushed petals. He dips a twig and flicks droplets in 4 directions. You don't speak, and he doesn't expect you to. This is an offering, not a sermon. Mainstream fact. The Templo Mayor, this very structure, was central to Aztec ritual life, used for offerings, sacrifices and celebrations tied to the solar calendar. Quirky tidbit. Some Aztec priests trained their voices to echo off the pyramid walls so their chants would sound like they were coming from inside your head. Performance art, with spiritual bonuses. You make your way down, slower this time, as if gravity has found you again. At the base of the temple, musicians begin to gather. Drummers with turtle shell instruments, flute players warming up, and dancers stretching beneath woven shade. You pause, watching, as the square begins to fill with rhythm, color, and anticipation. But something pulls at you. A whisper from the lake, perhaps. You leave the music behind and return to your canoe. The pyramids will remain. They've done so for centuries. You push away from the stone platform and glide once more into the green maze of canals. Behind you, the pyramids rise like mountains, carved by belief. Ahead the gardens wait, so does the water, and soon you'll meet the creatures that live just beneath it. You drift into one of the narrower side canals now, shaded by dense willow trees whose branches skim the surface like curious fingers. The air is cooler here, damper, and filled with subtle sounds. Water lapping against roots, a distant splash, the low trill of frogs in a chorus with crickets. You lean slightly over the side of your canoe and peer into the water, and there they are. Beneath the surface, this Chinampa city has another world, one that wiggles, slithers, and sometimes croaks. The Aztecs didn't just build their farms on water, they farmed with water. Fish dart through the shadows, tiny silvery things with dartboard eyes. A turtle peers at you like a sleepy philosopher. Somewhere near your paddle, an eel moves with unsettling grace. You gently steer closer to the edge of a chinampa that's clearly been left semi-wild. Reeds sway in thick clumps. Moss grows in shadowed nooks. A splash startles you, and then you spot it. A big one. A fat, splotchy frog, the gi, size of a mango, sitting like it owns the canal. Its throat pulses, but it doesn't croak, it just watches. Historians still argue whether these semi-wild chinampas were intentional parts of Aztec farming strategy, ecological buffers, pest control stations, or just convenient frog supermarkets. Regardless, they were essential. The ecosystem thrived here because the people didn't try to erase it. They worked with it. You reach into the water and scoop up a handful of mud. It's silky, soft, cool to the touch, and full of life. Tiny worms, invisible microbes, eggs of things that hop or crawl or buzz. This isn't dirt, it's magic. You sit back, eyes adjusting to the shadows. A bird swoops low, brown, fast, beak, full of something wriggly. It disappears into the reeds without ceremony. Another splash, another frog. This part of the city isn't as grand as the temples or as orderly as the gardens, but it might be the most alive. It's here that you see the full loop of Chinampa logic. Compost goes into the water. Water feeds the plants shelter the creatures feed the people. A perfect, gooey, humming circuit. A canoe slides past, this one piloted, by an older man in a wide hat. In the front of his boat is a net, not for fish but for frogs. You glance at your amphibian observer and silently wish him luck. Mainstream fact. Amphibians like frogs and axolotls were a common protein source for the Aztecs, and sometimes used in medicine and religious offerings. Quirky tidbit. Aztec children kept tiny turtles as pets, often tying beads to their shells and racing them on smooth floors. You imagine the slowest, sleepiest turtle derby in history and smile. You trail your fingers in the water as your canoe moves forward again, the ripples spreading like quiet applause. You pass a log, and on it rests another creature. This, one with eyes like coins and skin like algae. You whisper a hello, unsure whether it understands. You turn a corner in the canal and nearly jump. Just ahead is a floating mat of lily pads, and sitting atop one is a heron, regal and utterly still. It regards you with a sideways glance, as if weighing your worth. Then with one casual flap, it lifts into the air and glides away, vanishing between the reeds like a silver ghost. Your path is clear again. You drift in silence, feeling the city shift around you. It's not just a human place, it never was. The frogs, the fish, the birds, the turtles, even the insects, they're all residents too. The Aztecs didn't merely use nature, they listened to it. The gardens were never truly separate from the wild. Somewhere ahead a drumbeat echoes once, then again. Not war drums, just timekeeping, like a reminder that you're still moving forward. The sun filters through the trees in shifting stripes. You breathe in the humid air, thick with pollen and soft decay, and exhale slowly. You're not lost, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The light changes again. Not quite golden hour yet, but heading there. Shadows stretch long across the water as your canoe drifts back toward a more structured part of the lake. The Chinampas here are different, taller, better groomed, and lined with neatly stacked rows of flowering cacao, hummingbird sage, and plants with leaves bigger than your head. You've reached the edge of something rare. The Imperial Garden. Not just any garden, this one is said to belong to the Emperor himself. Moctezuma's botanical paradise, hidden just far enough from the city center to be serene but close enough to be guarded. You'd expect to be stopped, but no one appears. Perhaps you've arrived during siesta hour, or maybe, just maybe, the gods wanted to give you a private tour. You pull your canoe alongside the floating dock. This one is different, crafted from painted wood, with detailed carvings of jaguar paws and eagle feathers dancing around its edges. You step onto it, and the faint creak under your feet sounds almost polite. Ahead, a wide chinampa unfurls like a green carpet. Here plants grow in curious symmetry. Rows of cacao trees create a cool, dappled canopy. Beneath them, smaller herbs and mosses thrive. You walk slowly, reverently. This place doesn't whisper like the frog canals. It murmurs, with refinement. The kind of quiet reserved for libraries and royal chambers. You stop before a wooden sign, etched, not painted, with symbols you don't recognize but instinctively understand. This plot is sacred, not because of what it grows, but because of who once walked here. Moctezuma II, ruler of an empire, was known to escape the pressures of his court by retreating to these floating gardens. He'd stroll the rows in silence, accompanied only by the breeze and the quiet chirps of exotic birds. Historians still argue whether this imperial garden was truly for leisure or whether it had political motives. Was it meant to show visiting dignitaries the wealth and biodiversity of the empire? Or was it simply Moctezuma's way of staying sane amidst tribute lists and ritual schedules? You reach a corner of the chinampa where flowering vines have overtaken an old stone bench. You sit, the scent of cacao blossoms wafting around you. The leaves overhead filter the sunlight into patches of golden green. You hear the soft flutter of wings and glance up, just in time to see a hummingbird hover, then vanish. Mainstream fact. The Aztecs were among the first to cultivate cacao for ceremonial and medicinal use. Moctezuma was said to consume it daily, believing it gave strength and clarity. Quirky tidbit: according to some Spanish accounts, Moctezuma had gardeners who clipped flowers into the shapes of gods, and one who swore a plant once whispered stock tips. Okay, maybe not stock tips, but divine advice. You rise and continue walking. You pass orchids clinging to the bark of trees, strange spiky bromeliads, and a low patch of flowers arranged into the symbol of Tonatiuh, the sun god. The soil here smells richer. The water nearby seems clearer. Even the insects seem better dressed. At the far end of the chinampa, there's a narrow stone archway. Beyond it, a miniature canal circles a small island, an island filled with cages. Not of imprisonment, but of preservation. The emperor's personal aviary. Birds of every color, size and pitch once lived here. Parrots, quetzals, birds that sounded like bells or barked like dogs. Some were pets, others were tribute, and many were kept for feathers used in sacred costumes and war regalia. You don't see any birds now, only empty perches and faint old feathers stuck between the bamboo slats. Still, the echoes linger. You can almost hear them. You step back, letting the hush fall again. The imperial garden doesn't boast. It simply exists. And in doing so, it reminds you of a time when rulers valued the beauty of a flower as much as the blade of a sword. You return to your canoe slowly. The sun is lower now, stretching the trees into tall silhouettes. A breeze lifts petals into the air and carries them across the water like little banners. You push off gently, gliding away from the emperor's greenhouse. As you float into the widening canal once more, you realize how rare that moment was. You've walked where Moctezuma walked. You've breathed air perfumed with ancient cacao. You've seen the empire not in its battles or blood rituals, but in its stillness, its cultivation, its quiet pride. And the water welcomes you back with open arms. Back on the water, your canoe catches a slightly quicker current. The floating gardens ease away behind you, and you find yourself in a wide, sunlit channel. The hum of activity is unmistakable now. You're entering the beating heart of the daily marketplace, not land-based but liquid, vibrant and bobbing with motion. Ahead, dozens of canoes cluster in slow, swirling patterns. Some are piled high with squash and beans. Others offer baskets of woven goods, carved trinkets or bundles of flowers so brightly colored they seem to hum with their own light. The air here is alive with chatter, bartering, greetings, gossip, and the occasional rooster which you suspect is both merchandise and mascot. Welcome to Tlatelolco's floating market, the economic engine of Tenochtitlan's daily life. You paddle closer, careful not to nudge anyone's avocados. Around you, the water becomes a stage, and every canoe is a floating stall. A woman offers you a tamal from a steaming pot at the prow of her boat. Another waves bundles of chili peppers over her head like warning flags. You float past a pair of merchants mid-bargain, one pointing at a clay pot, and the other dramatically shaking his head, as if he's just been asked to sell his soul for a discount. The mood is cheerful but focused. You realize this isn't just shopping, it's community theater. Deals are made, jokes are exchanged, and reputations are maintained. A good market vendor is part stand-up comic, part diplomat, and part stage magician. That man just sold you a handful of dried mushrooms and made you feel grateful for it. Historians still argue whether the Aztec market economy was proto-capitalist or more aligned with tribute-based redistribution. Was this vibrant chaos the result of pure supply and demand, or a carefully balanced ecosystem upheld by imperial regulation? Either way, you're starting to suspect that everyone here, regardless of theory, knows exactly what their tomatoes are worth. You pass a young boy selling carved toys, spinning tops, feathered lizards, miniature temples. One of them looks suspiciously like the pyramid you visited earlier. You pick it up, give him a few cacao beans, and paddle on. That's right, cacao beans. Actual currency here, predating your credit card by several centuries and arguably more delicious. You drift into a quieter side of the market where things are less transactional and more juicy. Two women paddle slowly, deep in conversation, not business, gossip. You catch only snippets. Moctezuma's nephew. Ain't too much pulque at the last festival. And she still married him. You smile. Some things never change. Then there's the entertainment. A trio of musicians balancing in a wobbly canoe, one with a flute, one beating a turtle, shell like a drum, and one singing in a high nasal tone that somehow works. They gather a crowd, not for money but for attention. And the market gives it freely. Mainstream fact? Tlatelolco's market was reported by Spanish chroniclers to host up to 60,000 people on major market days, with separate zones for different goods and court officials overseeing fair trade. Quirky tidbit. Some vendors trained parrots to repeat. Product pitches. Imagine a bird squawking, "Best avocados, 2 beans only." It happened. You let your canoe drift to the market's edge, past a man shaving obsidian blades by hand. You catch sight of a rare fruit, deep purple, shaped like a teardrop, oozing something sticky and sweet. You decide not to ask what it is. Sometimes mystery is part of the flavor. As the crowd thins behind you, you paddle into calmer waters, again feeling the buzz of commerce give way to the quiet hum of reflection. Your canoe is heavier now, not with goods, but with moments. The woman's wink when she handed you that tamal, the parrot's sales pitch, the distant laugh of the flute player nearly losing his balance. You pass another canoe with 2 elderly men napping under woven hats. One of them snores, the other drools slightly. You realize they've probably been doing this every afternoon for decades. Honestly, they might be the smartest men in the empire. The sun has begun to sink, casting golden light across the water. The floating market slips behind you, its songs fading into memory. Your canoe moves forward again, carving a smooth, sleepy line across the mirrored surface of the lake. Your paddle dips quietly into the darkening water, sending slow ripples across a surface now tinted bronze by the setting sun. You're far from the bustle of the market now. The canal has narrowed again, winding between chinampas where few people linger. These gardens seem older, quieter, and as the sky deepens into amber and lavender, you begin to sense the rhythm of something more ancient than even the empire that surrounds you. You pull your canoe toward one such chinampa, drawn by the flicker of something low to the ground, flame maybe, or reflection. As you get closer, you realize it's both. A family is gathered at a small altar, nestled among tall corn stalks and flowering beans. No grand ceremony, just a handful of people kneeling, murmuring, and tossing small handfuls of something into a clay fire bowl. You stay a respectful distance, ears catching whispers of Nahuatl prayers, the soft rustle of leaves, and the occasional snort of a nearby pig rooting in the underbrush. This is not public religion. This is agriculture and the gods in dialogue. A whispered thank you to Tlaloc, perhaps, or a request for balance in tomorrow's weather. The Aztecs didn't separate farming from faith. Every harvest was a contract with the divine. Every seed planted was part of a larger promise. Historians still argue whether these daily rituals were formalized through temple mandates or passed on orally through families. Likely both, like a hymn hummed from memory. You slip past the altar quietly, giving the family space. Deeper into this part of the canals, you notice the chinampas are more irregular now, less squared off, more tangled. The reeds here grow higher. The soil smells richer, heavier with a day's sun and centuries of cycles. You've entered the world of the old farmers, the ones who never left. Just ahead, you find one, a man of indeterminate age, somewhere between 50 and forever, bent over a small plot of amaranth. His skin is weathered like cured leather. His hair is tied back with a simple cord, and his hands, even from a distance, look like they've held more earth than most people ever will. You watch as he leans in, whispers something to the soil, then gently presses a seed into place. Not dropped, placed. You float closer and he looks up briefly, gives a nod, and returns to his task without speaking. It's clear. This is not a performance. This is a prayer in motion. You pull your canoe up against a willow and let it rest. You watch the man work, slowly, steadily, like time has loosened its grip on him. Every step is deliberate. Check the soil, clear the weeds, speak to the plant. Repeat. There's no rush. The sun may set, but the garden doesn't keep hours. It keeps promises. Mainstream fact. Chinampa farmers could harvest multiple crops per year. Some plots were so fertile, they produced up to 7 annual yields. The system was sustainable, resilient, and astoundingly productive. Quirky tidbit. Aztec farmers sometimes made offerings of tiny figurines carved from maize dough, miniature farmers, ducks, and even frogs, to bless their harvest or warn it against laziness. Garden with attitude. The old farmer finally straightens his back and looks out over his garden, one hand resting on his hip, the other on a long digging stick. You wonder if he's thinking about the rains, or the eels, or maybe nothing at all, just breathing, just listening. The sky deepens to violet. You push away from the shore again, the paddle now moving slower, more thoughtfully. Behind you, the man returns to his planting. Ahead, the city begins to twinkle. Lamps being lit, fires glowing in clay hearths, shadows lengthening across the water. You pass a cluster of chinampas now occupied only by birds, settling into sleep. Egrets tuck their heads beneath their wings. Frogs begin their nighttime concert. Somewhere someone beats a drum, soft and steady, like a heartbeat marking the empire's breath. There's no ceremony for ending the day. No bells or sirens, just the natural descent into darkness as predictable and sacred as sunrise. You're not worried. The city knows this rhythm. So do the people. So do the plants. You drift quietly onward, a single canoe in a sea of shadows and silver reflections. The gardens have begun to sleep, and soon so will you. Night has begun to wrap itself around the city like a soft, damp blanket. The air cools as your canoe glides through still water, now inky and reflective, showing you a broken mirror of stars. The chinampas are dark shapes on either side, dotted, with the occasional glow of a cooking fire or oil lamp. A dog barks far off, a baby cries, then silence returns, as if even sound respects the hush that Tenochtitlan wears after sunset. You aren't alone out here. Canoes still pass you from time to time, fishermen heading to their night traps, lovers sharing quiet words, a priest humming low, tuneless notes as he returns from a lakeside shrine. The city doesn't sleep all at once. It surrenders slowly, like a candle burning low rather than snuffed out. Ahead, another figure stands on a dock, tall with a curved pole in hand. He's fishing, but not with hooks or bait. He holds a long stick tipped with a pronged spear. The moment his arm tenses, you see the water flash, then go still. He lifts a wriggling fish into a woven basket. No applause, no drama, just precision. He sees you, nods once, then turns back to the water. These are the other gardeners of the lake, the ones who farm protein from the canals. Eels, frogs, turtles, and fish were not luxuries but daily fare. For much of the population, each species had its season, its signs, its taboos. Some were caught only during particular moons. Others required rituals before harvest. Historians still argue whether these aquatic yields were systematically managed or left to natural cycles. Some scholars point to ancient spawning grounds marked with carved stakes and floral cords, suggesting deliberate planning. Others claim the Aztecs simply observed the patterns of nature and worked alongside them. You drift farther and begin to notice floating markers, bundles of reeds tied at strange angles, empty gourds bobbing in rows, and small torches anchored to driftwood. You've entered the waterfield equivalent of farmland. These are the nighttime harvesting grounds. Then, without warning, something splashes loudly near your canoe. You jolt, just a little. Your heart kicks up, but your hands stay steady. Moments later, the ripple settles, and you catch a glimpse. A long, slick back disappearing beneath the surface. An eel, maybe, or a very impolite turtle. You exhale, smile to yourself, and whisper, "Well played." Paddling slowly now, you arrive near a cluster of chinampas that seem different. They're partially sunken, half reclaimed by the lake. Wild vines drape over the edges, and roots dangle into the water like fingers searching for something. Lost. You've found the ghost farms, not haunted in the spooky sense, but old, retired, The Chinampas that were once bustling with crops and families now sit like forgotten stories. But even here, you see life. A sapling pushing up through a collapsed roof, a duck nesting in a broken canoe, a spray of yellow flowers blooming defiantly from a pile of rubble. Mainstream fact? Some Chinampas were abandoned during the final years of the empire, especially as wars and plagues weakened population centers and tribute demands stretched families too thin. Quirky tidbit. It said that certain Chinampas remembered. Their farmers, families who tried to abandon them, found their crops wouldn't grow elsewhere. Eventually they returned, murmuring apologies into the dirt. Superstition? Maybe. But in Tenochtitlan, soil has ears. You pass one last sunken plot, the moonlight catching on a half-buried obsidian blade. You wonder if it was a tool, a weapon, or just forgotten. The lake doesn't tell you. It keeps its stories quiet, preserved in layers of mud and memory. Far ahead, the main causeway begins to reappear. You see small torches flickering atop stone piers, guiding nighttime travelers. The pyramids are silhouettes now, dark triangles against a sky slowly spilling stars. Your paddle slices the water again, quiet and rhythmic. The breeze cools the back of your neck, and the smell of damp earth rises like incense. You're still moving, but the world has slowed. You glide into a wider canal now, open, exposed, and curiously still. The water here has a kind of hush to it, like a stage cleared for the next act. Something feels different, not dangerous, just heavier. You pause your paddling and listen, not just with your ears but your whole body. The frogs have quieted, the wind holds its breath, even the bugs seem to be waiting. That's when you notice them. The stakes. Tall wooden poles protruding from the water in a neat line, each marked with red ribbons and small tokens, dried flowers, bits of obsidian, feathers. You're entering a Chinampa zone with a darker history. These weren't just gardens, they were strategy. During times of siege, rebellion, or invasion, the Aztecs didn't just fight on pyramids, they fought with the land itself, or in this case, the water. You ease forward, more alert now. Around you, the landscape begins to tell its secrets. Certain Chinampas here are ringed with sharpened bamboo. Others have been narrowed to allow only one canoe through at a time, natural choke points. Still others have deliberately sunken sections that you only notice when your paddle hits something solid. Beneath the surface. Her trap. Historians still argue whether the use of Chinampas as weapons was a long-established military tactic or a desperate improvisation during the Spanish invasion. Either way, these floating farms could become a fortress at a moment's notice. Imagine how it must have looked. Enemies trying to navigate unfamiliar canals while being ambushed from behind garden walls. Spears hidden beneath flower beds, archers disguised as farmers. Chili smoke used to blind invaders. A blooming battlefield. And if you're thinking the Aztecs wouldn't weaponize gardening, remember, this was an empire where even flowers were political. Nobles used rare blooms to demonstrate wealth and divine favor. Priests offered wreaths to the gods before sacrifices, and warriors were sometimes called flower knights because battle and beauty were never far apart. You paddle past a Chinampa that still bears scorch marks. Its trees grow at odd angles, twisted by fire or time, yet wild maize pushes through the cracks golden and defiant. Life returns. Always. A few meters ahead, you spot a small platform floating alone in the canal. Upon it stands a sculpture, rough, simple, carved from a single hunk of dark volcanic rock. It depicts a kneeling man holding a maize plant in one hand and a club in the other. He looks skyward, mouth open, not in joy or agony, but something between. A prayer, a war cry. You float in silence, letting the image sink in. In this city, nourishment and resistance are carved from the same stone. Mainstream fact? During the siege of Tenochtitlan by the Spanish, Chinampas played a key role in both defense and survival, providing food and cover even as the city crumbled. Quirky tidbit. Some warriors were said to paint themselves in patterns inspired by plants they had grown. Like walking camouflage made of pride and pigment. You push off gently again, leaving the war gardens behind. The water seems to sigh with you, relieved to return to something quieter. The stakes grow fewer, the red ribbons disappear. Soon the frogs begin their chorus once more. The wind picks up, rustling the reeds with a sound like applause. You drift toward a group of willows leaning dramatically over the canal. Their branches hang low, brushing your shoulders as you pass beneath them like veils. They mark the transition, you realize, from the city of war back to the city of roots. Your paddle catches the current and the canoe drifts faster now. You sit back, arms resting, eyes toward the stars. Above, constellations blink into view, tiny windows into stories much older than this lake. Maybe even older than the first Chinampa. You pass a young man in a canoe heading the opposite way, his face painted, his boat carrying bundles of maize and herbs. He nods once. Warrior or farmer? Maybe both. In Tenochtitlan, they often were. Your canoe coasts softly now, as if even the lake understands that the night is winding down. The stars above have fully taken over, mirrored almost perfectly by the water below. It feels like you're floating in space, suspended between two infinite skies. The Chinampas on either side are barely silhouettes now, quiet outlines against the velvet dark. You've returned to the older part of the city's edge, where the water grows stiller and the gardens begin to thin. It's not just because of the time, it's because something has changed. Not in you, but around you. The lake, the air, the sound of distant drums. They all feel softer, more final. You pull close to a long-abandoned Chinampa, half collapsed into the water. Its willow trees are wild now, their branches tangled like uncombed hair. The soil has given way in places, revealing the twisted mesh of roots and reed frames beneath. It's the skeleton of a garden, but still strangely alive. You can hear it breathe in the way the leaves rustle, the way the water laps gently at its edge. You step off onto the soft earth one last time. There's no path here, no temple, no family altar, just the remains of a place once cultivated and cherished. You walk carefully, your steps quiet, mindful not to disturb the frogs or the memories. Here in this corner of the city, the collapse didn't come suddenly. It came like evening comes, slow, inevitable, unnoticed, until everything's gone dim. You kneel by an old planting bed and see a single sprout still pushing through the soil. You don't recognize the plant. That's okay. Not everything must be named to be honored. Historians still argue whether the fall of Tenochtitlan marked the true end of the Chinampa system, or if it slowly decayed under colonial rule, choked by neglect and drained by new priorities. Truth is it never fully disappeared. Like this garden, it simply sank, then held on. You walk to the edge of the platform and look out at the lake. From here, the city is a whisper. The pyramids are low shadows, the fires now just distant twinkles. And behind it all, the outline of the mountains glows faintly in starlight, watching without judgment. Mainstream fact. After the conquest, many of the Chinampa networks were repurposed, fragmented or drained to build colonial roads and estates. Some were destroyed outright, seen as relics of a defeated people. Quirky tidbit, even today in parts of Xochimilco, a southern borough of modern Mexico City, farmers still grow vegetables on surviving Chinampas. Some say the soil there has memory. The radishes grow sweeter. The frogs are more musical. Coincidence? Maybe. But listen long enough and you'll wonder too. You sit now, legs folded on the edge of the garden. The water laps gently. Your canoe waits, bobbing slightly in rhythm. You take a long breath, and in the distance a conch horn sounds, just once, low and haunting. A signal of transition, or a final call, or just someone saying good night. The lake reflects it all. The stars, the moon, your face. You dip your hand into the water slowly, breaking the mirror, but not shattering it. The ripples fade. The sky returns. You rise and return to your canoe, pushing off one last time. The garden behind you fades into the night. You paddle slowly, each stroke more like a sigh than a movement. The water carries you forward, not in haste but in kindness. As you glide past one last Chinampa, A frog lets out a loud, defiant croak. You laugh softly. Even now there's room for comedy. The city is silent but not dead, never dead, just waiting, just dreaming. And perhaps tomorrow someone else will float this path. Perhaps they'll hear the same frogs, see the same stars, and wonder, as you do now, how a place can be both gone and eternal. The final stretch of your journey unfolds with a grace you no longer question. The paddle barely touches the water now. It's as if the canoe knows its way home, guided by memory, starlight, and the breath of the lake itself. You pass the causeways again, though they look different in the moonlight. Not grand, not busy, just long lines of stone, half submerged and moss-covered, stretching across the water like the ribs of an old creature still dreaming beneath the surface. The occasional torch flickers in the distance, a reminder that not everyone has gone to sleep. Some still sit by the water's edge, lost in their own quiet reverie. Your canoe moves past a familiar chinampa, one you floated by at the start of this journey. It's darker now. The frogs have gone quiet. The flowers have closed for the night. Even the willow branches hang lower, like the trees themselves are tired. You stop paddling entirely. Let the water carry you. You lean back and watch the sky. The constellations wheel slowly above. The Big Dipper, the Pleiades. Maybe you even spot Tenochtitlan, the Aztec star ladder. They believed it was the bridge by which souls ascended after death, or maybe just a story they told children who didn't like the dark. Historians still argue whether the fall of Tenochtitlan was a single moment, the capture of Moctezuma, the arrival of Cortes, or a long unraveling that began far earlier in droughts, plagues, or fractured alliances. But here, floating in the stillness, you sense that endings are rarely as sharp as we imagine. They unfold slowly, with roots that go deep and echoes that never fully fade. You pass a cluster of reeds where a single candle burns atop a floating altar. There's no one near it, no ceremony, just flame and reflection. Perhaps it's for a fisherman lost to the current, or a child gone too soon, or a garden that never grew. It flickers once, then twice, then continues burning. Some things do. Mainstream fact? Though the Chinampa system was diminished by colonization, elements of it were quietly passed down, adapted, and in some regions resurrected. A few scholars believe it's one of the most sustainable farming systems ever developed. Quirky tidbit: there's a modern project in Mexico City right now training local youth to rebuild and maintain chinampas using pre-Hispanic techniques, and they swear the frogs return first. You smile at that. Your canoe passes beneath a low-hanging branch, one final curtain drawn across the night. Beyond it, the lights of modern Mexico shimmer in the far distance. A city built atop an empire, which was built atop a lake, which was built atop a dream. You realize now, nothing in Tenochtitlan ever truly sank. It simply changed form. Diworm. Water grows quieter still. You let your paddle rest across your lap. The stars above stretch into arcs. A bird calls once softly, and in the breeze that rustles your hair, you hear not farewell, but a gentle reminder. The city remembers. Its gardens still float, and so do you. The canoe drifts now, almost still, as if the lake has cradled you in its arms. Your limbs feel heavy, your breath deeper. Around you the world continues its quiet breathing, water shifting softly beneath, the trees above barely swaying, and the stars slowly rotating across the velvet sky. You've traveled through floating gardens, ancient rituals, sunrise chants, frog-filled canals, and the quiet strength of a people who shaped water into sustenance, stone into temples, and silence into memory. You've heard the songs of farmers and warriors, merchants and mothers, children and ghosts. Now your eyes grow heavier. The world blurs slightly, not in confusion, but in calm. There is nothing more to see tonight, nothing more to learn. Only the rhythm of water, the hush of reeds, and the cool press of wind on your cheek. Let the city fade now, slowly, respectfully. The pyramids are behind you. The firelight grows faint. The frogs grow quiet. Even your heartbeat seems to match the slow lap of water against wood. You're safe. You're floating. You're home. Let your breath fall into the rhythm of the lake. Let your thoughts drift like petals on the surface. There's nowhere to be. Nothing to carry, nothing to fix, just the sound of the water and the memory of a garden that never sank. Good night.